In the previous lectures, we have been studying about Turing machines, and we have also seen a couple of examples regarding Turing machines. Now, before we proceed to more examples, there are a couple of topics that we need to discuss regarding the Turing machine, and one among them is known as the Church-Turing thesis, about which we will be discussing in this lecture. Now, what is a Church-Turing thesis? The Church-Turing thesis, it comes from the question, what does computable mean? So in the olden days, the term computable was actually fuzzy, and we could not give a proper definition or a standard in order to define or explain what does computable actually mean. So in order to do that, Alonzo Church, he came up with his idea of something known as the lambda calculus. So the lambda calculus was kind of a machine that could perform some computations, and he came up with the idea of lambda calculus, saying that whatever is able to be computed by a lambda calculus, that can be called as computable. So Alonzo Church, he was an American mathematician and logician who made major contributions to mathematical logic and the foundations of theoretical computer science. And later on, Alan Turing, he came up with his idea of Turing machine, which we have been discussing. So Turing machine is also another kind of machine that can be used to perform computation, and he came up with the idea that whatever can be computed using Turing machine, that is what is known as computable. And Alan Turing, he was an English computer scientist, and also he was a mathematician, logician, cryptanalyst, philosopher, and theoretical biologist. And surprisingly, Alan Turing, he was the student of Alonzo Church. So both these people, they came up with their idea of lambda calculus and Turing machine and said that whatever is computable by these machines, that is what we can call computable. Now, before we go more into the details of this, let us see some of the variations of Turing machines that we can have. So till now we have been discussing about the Turing machines, and we have seen the properties of those Turing machines that we have already discussed even in the examples. Now let us see some of the variations that we can have in these Turing machines. So the first one says one tape or many. So in the Turing machines that we have already discussed, we saw that it has a tape, and each Turing machine was having only one tape. Now the question is, if we are allowed to have more than one tape in a Turing machine, then will the Turing machine with more number of tapes be able to perform more powerful computations as compared to the Turing machine with only one tape? So that is one question that we can have. And then another one says infinite on both ends. So when we have seen the Turing machines, we saw that the tape of the Turing machine, it is an infinite sequence of symbols, which I already taught you, and we saw that it was infinite on the right end. So whenever I drew the diagram of the tape, I always leave the right end of the tape open, which means that that is infinite. Now the question is, if we can have infinite on both ends, that means if both the left end as well as the right end is made to be infinite, then will that Turing machine with tape of both ends infinite be more powerful than the Turing machine with the tape where it has only one end infinite? So that is another question that we can have. And then the next one says alphabets only 0, 1 or more. So the Turing machines that we have discussed, we basically use the 0 and 1 as our alphabets. Now the question is, if we have more alphabets than only zeros and ones, then will having those more alphabets add power to the Turing machine, and will it be able to perform more powerful computations as compared to only 0 and 1 alphabet set? And then another one says, can the head also stay in the same place? So when we were seeing the tape of the Turing machine, we saw that in our Turing machine the rule was that the tape head should always move either one step to the right or one step to the left on every transition. The tape head always had to move. Now, if we have a variation of Turing machine in which the tape head is allowed to stay in the same place without moving, then will that Turing machine have more power than the regular Turing machine that we have seen? And another variation says if it allows non-determinism. So all the Turing machines that we have seen till now, they were deterministic. Now if we allow non-determinism and make our Turing machines non-deterministic, then will that add more power to the Turing machine? So these are some of the variations that we have, and then the question is, will these variations or will these extra features give us more power in our Turing machine? So just by looking at it, we may think that yes, by having these features, we can have more power in our Turing machine. But surprisingly, all variations are equivalent in computing capability. All the variations of Turing machine, whatever features you add to them, it is shown that all those variations are equivalent in computing capability. Whether you have these features or not, their computing capability or the power remains the same. I am not going to prove this, but we can always show that we can model one kind of Turing machine from the other. Like for example, let's say that we have a Turing machine with more than one number of tapes. That means it has many tapes, and let's say that it is able to perform a certain computation. And we can also show that that same computation or that same task can be performed by even the Turing machine with only one tape. And the same thing goes for all the other features and all the other variations that we have. So all variations are equivalent in computing capability. And in the same way, Turing machine and lambda calculus are also equivalent in power. So we saw about the lambda calculus and the Turing machine, which I was discussing in the beginning of this lecture. And though the way they work are different, though the way they operate are completely different, but they are both equivalent in power. So we can say that anything that can be computed or any task that can be performed using either Turing machine or lambda calculus is what we can call computable. But we actually don't use the lambda calculus as a benchmark to standardize the computation term, but we use the Turing machines. So we say that algorithmically computable means computable by a Turing machine. If anything can be computed using an algorithm, that means it can be computed by a Turing machine. So that is about the Church-Turing thesis. Alright, now as we have understood more about the Turing machine and the Church-Turing thesis, this is a good time to talk about the Turing test. So you must have heard about this Turing test, which is a very common term, and it is also a very famous term which you must have seen in media and other stuff where it is made very famous. And many people confuse Turing machine and Turing test to be the same thing. But I want to tell you in this lecture that Turing machine and Turing test, they are completely different things. Never confuse a Turing machine and Turing test to be the same thing. Turing test, it has more to do with artificial intelligence, and it is a test that was developed in order to see whether a computer or a computer program has the same kind of intelligence as that of a human. And Turing machine, we know what it is, we have been discussing about it. So Turing machine and Turing test, they are not the same things. The only similarity between Turing test and Turing machine is that they were both designed and developed by the same person, that is Alan Turing. Apart from that, they are completely different things. So don't be confused about Turing machine and Turing test. Alright, now as we have understood all this, it is a good time to talk about some of the different classes of languages that we have. Now here we will see the different classes of languages that we have. So you must have seen this diagram even in some of the previous lectures in this lecture series, especially in the very first lecture and also in the lecture where we started talking about Turing machines. So in those lectures, the diagram that we had, it was representing the classes of languages as they were accepted by the different machines that we had. For example, we had the regular languages that was accepted by finite state machines, then we had context-free languages that was accepted by push-down automata, and then I directly talked about recursively enumerable languages which was accepted by Turing machines, and then we had the undecidable languages. But here you see that there is something extra, which is the decidable language and Turing recognizable languages. There is an extra circle over here, and why this is there is because here we are discussing in detail about Turing machines, and as far as Turing machines are concerned, there are actually two classes of languages which we can have in Turing machines. One is the decidable languages, Turing decidable languages, also known as recursive languages, and then we have the Turing recognizable languages, also known as the recursively enumerable languages. Now let us see what these two languages mean and how they are different from each other. So decidable languages, these are the languages that can be decided by a Turing machine. And what it means is that if you pass a string from this language to the Turing machine, then if the string belongs to the language, then the Turing machine will accept it and it will halt. And if the string does not belong to the language, then the Turing machine will reject and it will halt. So what we can see is that in case of decidable languages, the Turing machine always comes to a halt. So I already discussed with you what is the meaning of halting and looping. So in case of decidable languages, Turing machine will always come to a halt. And in case of Turing recognizable languages or the recursively enumerable languages, in this case, if you pass a string that belongs to the language to the Turing machine, then the Turing machine will accept and it will halt. But if you pass a string that does not belong to the language, then the Turing machine may not halt and it may go into a loop. So in this case, that is in Turing recognizable or recursively enumerable languages, the halting is not guaranteed in the Turing machine. The Turing machine may or may not halt. If the string belongs to the language, it will halt, but if it does not belong to the language, then the Turing machine may not come to a halt. So we see that the difference between these two is that in decidable, the Turing machine always halt, but in recognizable, the Turing machine may or may not halt. So that is the difference between these two classes of languages. And on top of that, we have the non-decidable or the undecidable languages. So these are something very different, and these languages, whatever string you pass to the Turing machine, they will never come to a halt. The Turing machine never comes to a halt in case of these undecidable languages. So this basically is a Venn diagram where the circles represents the different classes of languages, and then the square, it represents all the problems or all the languages. So these are the different classes of languages. We have already talked about something like this, but since we are discussing about Turing machines, we need to be clear about these two different classes that we have. So that is why I am explaining these classes of language again, emphasizing on the two different classes of language which is there in the Turing machines, which is decidable and recognizable. So that was about the different classes of languages, and we also saw how computation or the term computable is actually defined using the Church-Turing thesis. And I hope this was all clear to you. So thank you for watching and see you in the next one.